Lance Stroll's disaster performance has continued in Shanghai, and it seems like the Canadian driver is simply determined to prove to the entire F1 grid that he is here only because of the presence of his father, despite his latest comments, which shed a bit of mystery on his future in the sport. The team is eager to continue the collaboration with him on a long-term basis. But after his latest move in China, it's safe to say that his father would be smart to think twice if he is determined to achieve what he has architected for his team, a championship mentality. But with this relationship being so complex, could Lance be the death blow for Aston Martin? And if so, can Honda change something in this picture? The Chinese Grand Prix has gone from bad to worse for Lance Stroll, who, after being again out-qualified by his teammate Fernando Alonso, went on to hit Daniel Ricciardo from the back during the safety car period, which was quite a bizarre incident that left the F1 experts in awe. The Canadian driver blamed Ricciardo for brake testing him, which is, again, quite a funny and bizarre excuse given the fact that they were in the middle of the pack and there were at least 3 cars ahead of him. Nonetheless, that ruined what was a solid race for Ricciardo, who had to retire. And the fact that Stroll called him an idiot has only sparked further talks about his professionalism and place in the sport. The stewards penalised Lawrence with a 10-second penalty, which he served at the last pit stop, and finishing dead last was the cherry on top when it comes to his overall performance this season. Something we can easily describe as nowhere near the standard for a team that is fighting Mercedes for P4 in the Constructors' Championship. Up until this race, the difference between these teams was just 1 point in favour of the Silver Arrows. But after the strong sprint race showing of Hamilton and Russell finishing higher than Alonso in the race, combined with the stellar P9 finish of the 7-time world champion after starting at the back of the grid, that difference has increased to a total of 12 points in favour of Mercedes. It's not helping that out of the 40 points that Aston Martin has scored in the 2024 season, 31 are courtesy of Alonso, who has now more than triple the amount of Stroll's points and is sitting at P10 with 9 points behind his name. And after the latest accident in China, the fans are even angrier with the statements that the team have made revolving around the future of Lance in the sport, as Aston Martin see him as a vital part of their future due to his technical knowledge. Be that as it may, with only one driver scoring nearly all of the points of the team, one couldn't help but wonder, is Aston Martin bound to be stuck in the midfield unless something changes in that second seat? And is there any chance that we can see Stroll out of the sport with his father's ownership remaining the same? The accident in China has sparked these talks to a further extent, and when talking about it, Lance went on to further deny responsibility for the crash that ultimately ruined Ricciardo's race, as he said, "Concertina effect. Someone braked at the front of the pack, I don't know who, and then everyone stopped. The car in front of me just stopped from 60 km per hour to 0, and then boom, so it was really stupid. It was one of those situations. I think it's just because I hit the guy, but someone hit the brakes and caused this entire situation. I don't know, but I find it's a joke. I got a penalty because of the end results that I hit Ricciardo, but it's not like everything was normal and I just ploughed into the back of him. It was a really odd concertina effect that I would have liked to see the stewards take into consideration, maybe a little more. But the facts remain as they are. Ricciardo was not at the lead of the race, they were both stuck in the middle of the pack, and Stroll should have paid a lot more attention to what happened in front of the Aussie, rather than just focusing on the back of the RB car. To top that off, Ricciardo left the entire accident very furious, saying that after watching Stroll's onboard camera, he noticed that the Canadian driver was not even paying attention to what was happening in front of him, which, again, is quite an unprofessional and amateur thing to do in the middle of the race. When talking about the incident that left Ricciardo with terminal damage to his diffuser, the Honey Badger said, "It's a restart of the race, so we don't know what the leader of the race is going to do, so you have to be as vigilant as ever. How hard Stroll hit me? Pretty much half of his car went under mine, so it was not a small judgment. He was miles off. For that, to me, there is no excuse. What is even more frustrating is that I watched his onboard camera. He is not even looking at me. You can see his helmet. He's looking at the apex of the corner. I don't know why he's not looking at the car in front." Similar to Ricciardo, there are many people who have no idea why Stroll is still racing in the sport, even though the answer is pretty similar. His father owns the team, and Aston Martin have stated that their future lies with the young Canadian driver. The technical knowledge that he provides to the Silverstone-based squad seems crucial when it comes to committing to a driver of Stroll's caliber. even though this quality of Lance could be very well exercised in the simulator as well as other championship categories that Aston Martin races in. Even Max Verstappen was in awe and started to laugh when he saw how Lance hit Ricciardo from the back, not being able to understand whether or not this happened during the safety car incident due to the bizarreness of the incident. Regardless, the question remains, should Aston Martin pursue a future with Lance being the second driver? With the arrival of Honda from 2026 onwards, Aston Martin expects to up its competitiveness to the top teams. However, in order for them to do so, they need two drivers who would be scoring high points week in and week out, and so far, it does seem like Alonso is the only man that Aston Martin can count on. Regardless, Honda's relationship with their own drivers is very unique. We've seen how they've treated Tsunoda in times where he was heavily underperforming in AlphaTauri, only for the Japanese driver to turn his fortunes around in racing bulls and be considered one of the best candidates to have a seat in Aston Martin if the situation changes there sometime soon. But given the fact that the Silverstone-based team is not willing to let go of Lance, a statement that could have been made under pressure from Lawrence, one couldn't help but note the self-destructive pattern that the team is applying to itself, only because of the father-son relationship that is present in the ownership of the team. When talking about the future of Lance, the team principal of Aston Martin, Mike Crack, went on to say, "Last week, the news was mainly about Alonso, but we also know that Aston Martin is Lance's home. We know that, and the whole project has always been around him. So we look for continuity. I have always said that this is very important, so we'll see what happens in the next few weeks." But on the other hand, Koji Watanabe, the director of Honda F1, said that the ultimate goal for Honda is to have the best possible lineup from 2026 onwards. And if they see shenanigans continue from 2026 onwards, it's safe to say that they will be putting Lawrence under a lot of pressure when it comes to changing the driver's lineup. Even with Alonso, who is not even in the same sentence, let alone in the same league with Stroll, Honda had long talks before they agreed that a collaboration was the right way to go forward after their disgruntling time at McLaren back in 2017. Therefore, it's of very great importance to Lance that he understands that just because his father owns the team doesn't mean that once a greater party joins and starts to demand results, his seat will be safe. And this is where Aston Martin needs to answer a lot of questions too, with the most important one being whether or not they're ready to destroy the comfort zone they've created for Lance and score great results, or whether they want to continue fighting in the midfield after all the investments and keep disappointing people and the fans all around the world. It's safe to assume that there will be lots of protests against Lance if the racing maneuvers that he is practicing week in and week out continue in this manner. So with all this in mind, there are a lot of intangibles that are yet to be fixed once the Silverstone-based squad enters the new era with Honda. This is primarily because Honda will be joining them after a successful venture with Red Bull, and the last thing they would be satisfied with is watching Lance destroy every chance they have at competitiveness. And if nothing changes, then this will definitely trigger some much-needed actions from the Japanese manufacturer, who will definitely have a much greater say in the driver's lineup than Mercedes, for example, the current engine supplier of Aston Martin. With this in mind, do you think that Lance should be leaving the team as soon as possible? Let us know in the comments below.